Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another round of Modern Lay here in the booth with Marco and Ginkgo.
Hello, everyone.
Today we have for you Ponza versus Death and Taxes. Now,
Wow.
this is
Scary.
some scary names being said here because both of those decks want to stack out the opponent in different terms. So, for the ones who do not know what Ponza does, strange name for a strange deck, this is a land destruction deck. This is mainly red and green, probably some whites for the sideboard, maybe even main board. Splashes, but it's mostly a land destruction deck, followed by extremely powerful spells.
It has it all. It has Stone Rain, Cleansing Wildfire, Blood Moon, every kind of other moon that comes and deals with your lands. So, yeah, it's not a pleasant deck to play against. On the other side,
we have Death and Taxes, deck near and dear to my heart, but that has fallen out of favor for a while. But we see here a player struggling to get a hold of it. So this is a mono white deck that uses effects such as Talia, Guardian of Traben, and Esper Sentinel. Sadly, only those two have remained from the original stacking plan, which is to make your opponents pay a little bit more for what they ask for.
Slowing them down and slowing their gameplay down. We have Talia entering from the tax player. And also we have Urza Saga land being played with Etherwild on one counter. It's a decent start from the Taxes player, especially with Etherwild protecting the, I guess, mana base.
Yeah, so Etherwild is a crucial card in several matchups, one of them being Ponza, because if they blow up all of your lands, you still have a way of playing your spells with Etherwild. On the other hand, also, Death and Taxes is mana hungry. What I mean by that is they want to play as much stacking effects as possible, as early as possible, and then continue on. One of the ways that they can do this is cheating on mana with Etherwild, as Merfolk do, for example. And the lands themselves are also very powerful. We have Urza's Saga, we have Mishra's Factory, we have several other lands that produce mainly white mana, but also some other colors, probably for sideboard consideration in something like Prismatic Ending or even Engineered Explosives that could be played for more than once.
Now we have turn 3 for the Ponza deck, which is definitely a scary turn for. But of course,
there is an Arbor Elf hanging there.
Okay.
There is a scary card to untap with, because if there is something like an Utopia Sprawl on one of the forests or one of the other lands, it can generate 3 mana on turn 2 or even 4 mana on turn 2, and it can become something like a Blood Moon, something like Karn, the Great Creator, Questing Beast, Chandra, Torch of Defiance, any of those cards. I do think that the Death and Taxes player would struggle against, because it is either removal or hard to remove, and those are definitely not something that you want to see if you are the Death and Taxes player.
When Ponza has 3 mana, of course, it's scary because a lot of its destruction and blood moons come when the 3 mana are on the board. And we see a blood moon being played
for 4 mana because of Talia.
Because of Talia, of course.
And this is a construct being made in response, and also Etherwild activation for Stoneforge Mystic. But the Urza Saga gets destroyed because of the state-based actions of having more counters than lore counters or other way around. I never know what the actual wording is, but nevertheless, it gets destroyed as a state-based actions under Blood Moon. Now, Stoneforge Misting will tutor something up.
This is a great game plan for that and Texas. Stoneforge Mystic with While at the end of the opponent's turn, so it can basically tap 4 cards like Batterskull or Caldera Complete almost immediately.
Yeah, now we see a Lion Sash actually here. This is an enchantment creature, equipment actually creature that can be tutored out with Stoneforge Mystic, but also can be viled in. And there is something going on here. Maybe the Ponza player just requested to see it. I am not certain, but
Okay.
Caldera Complete is definitely the correct name and correct card to get. Although I must see that the Death and Taxes player, although being mono white, does not have planes.
Does not have planes, which is required to tap the Stoneforge Mystic.
Exactly, to activate it. But regardless, there is another mountain. A big attack is coming in because there is a construct token, there is Talia, there is Stoneforge Mystic, there is Ethervile on 3, and we will see what it entails. Now, Thalia here doing its work. Oh, we see an alternative plan. This is
Sword of Fire and Ice, if I'm not mistaken.
yes. Sword of Fire and Ice is something that is has long been a staple in such decks, in any decks that care about Stoneforge Mystic. Since fallen out of favor for some more modern, I wouldn't say better, but modern versions of equipments such as Batterskull or Caldera Complete or Nettle Cyst or Shadow Spear, but definitely in such a deck that is hungry for card advantage, this is a great piece that can both deal damage, protect the creature that is wielding it, and also draw cards, all in a single package.
So we see the Ponza player on 8 life, not in a greatest situation, even though the Texas player can't play their hand efficiently, I should say. They still have a sizable board and a lot of threats. I think this is, in fact, a 2-turn counter. Or maybe even no. With the equip of the sword, I think we have lethal next turn. So what is the Ponza player plan right now? He needs to do something. He has 1 basic forest and 3 mountains.
Also an activation of Arbor Elf, which gives them basically 5 mana. And 5 mana for a deck like this is a plenty, as we said, even through Talia effects, and this is something why Death and Taxes actually got nerfed by, not by the deck itself, but by the effectiveness or efficacy of the cards, such as Lightning Bolt, but also the newer cards. The pitch elementals are a great example of something that you do not have to pay mana and do not have to pay taxes. And we see some removal being played here. Artifact Distraction and Lightning Bolt taking both Talia and Ethervile, stunting the development of the Death and Taxes player, but there is still the possibility of equip on Stoneforge Mystic, crunch in with the construct, with the Stoneforge Mystic, who is a 3/4 now, can deal 2 damage to anything, and drawing a card is also an added value and a benefit. So they draw a card, 2 damage goes to the Arbor Elf, mitigating the mana. As we saw, they tried using all of their mana last turn. Having less mana is always good for the Death and Taxes player.
So without planes, it seems that the Taxes player still has a game within his grasp.
As we said, Ether Vial playing a big role in this, even through Blood Moon, getting to Vial in the Stoneforge Mystic, tutoring up. If the Sword of Fire and Ice was not in their hand, I do believe they would have gotten it instead of Caldra, and this is Bloodbraid Elf cascading into nothing important, and the game 1 goes to Death and Taxes. Now, going into the sideboard, we do want to thank all of our subscribers, all 100 plus of you who have been with us through this journey. Thank you all, and here is to several zeros more. Also, we want to remind you, if you like this video and others like this, do comment, share, subscribe, praise clothes, and everything else needed for all of this to be fruitful and to mutual benefit.
It's free, it doesn't cost anything, and it's amazing. You can also turn the bell notifications on so you get notified when we put our new videos up on the channel. If not, that's fine, but it doesn't cost anything, and we are not we are not super boring, like every day 3 videos. No, we are moderate, and we won't bother you often.
Coming into the sideboard, what do you think? So you are the Ponza player. How would you side? Is there anything that you want to bring in against decks such as Death and Taxes?
So I guess that as a Ponza player, I'm not a Ponza player, but I'm putting myself in the mindset of a Ponza player. I would put more land destruction. Jokes aside, I think that a great game plan for sideboarding against Death and Taxes is card like Fury.
Oof. I have been on the Death and Taxes side many a times against something like a Fury, and I must say, boy oh boy, do these X ones not like Fury. Fury is usually a card that is not only a 3-for-1 when it enters, but also several for 1 when needed to answer it. As we saw, Death and Taxes is not a deck that has a lot of lands on their disposal. If they do, they want to sack them for cards, and they want to expand them in form of Urza Saga and so forth. So getting up to 5 mana for something like Solitude, to get rid of something like Fury, for being 1-for-1 after Fury has already been a 3-for-1, is extremely difficult. So Fury is, if it was not pitched, is often 3, 4, 5-for-1 against Death and Taxes.
It's important to note how devastating pitch elementals can be generally for Death and Taxes, because they are all creature spells, and Taxes,
yes.
Death and Taxes doesn't play well into creature spells, especially if they are being cast for 0 mana. They can't be taxed. So it's devastating in more ways than one. So I imagine that Ponza, if they have Fury in their sideboard,
they will deploy them.
Yes, exactly.
And a great start for the Ponza player. This is Utopia Sprawl on a forest, probably naming red, but this is a removal for the Utopia Sprawl, stunting their early development. Fist bump for both of them, just saying good work, good having this kind of partnership and good sportsmanship on actually the video. Another land for Ponza player, and instead of having 3 mana, now they have 2, and we will see what they do with those 2 mana. As we said, 3 mana is crucial for this deck, because all the Blood Moons, all the Run Destruction, everything else comes at 3 mana, and we see 1 land on the Death and Taxes side now, barring this is their first turn, but if the Ponza player had 3 mana, maybe Death and Taxes player wouldn't have any lands on their side.
Exactly. So this prismatic ending was very important.
Oh, and Bonecrusher main phase just going on an adventure. Interesting, extremely interesting.
So why do you think the Ponza player did this?
Well, maybe it was just so that they have the Bone Crusher as a 4/3, which is a giant beater against something like Death and Taxes, but they could have had this at the end step and actually destroyed the Giver of Runes, killed it. I do not know what actually the reasoning was for making it main phase, but this could have been just tiredness from the player or just lapsus.
Perhaps even a retaliation because of that prismatic
ending. I doubt it, but it could be.
Yeah, very doubtful. Okay, so we see. I think the Ponza player is
on the play. Yes, deep in the tank now. Debating probably between, I do think I saw a lightning bolt in their hand, but debating between probably killing the Giver of Runes and being that they're all the whole turn, or deploying the Bonecrusher Giant, which can be a powerful beater against Death and Taxes, as we said, because Death and Taxes does not have a creature that has more than probably 2 toughness.
Probably, yeah. Perhaps the Ponza player is thinking about, why did I play my Bonecrusher Giant on the adventure? Why?
Yeah. But the Ether Vial taking up to 1, another pain land from the Death and Taxes player. These ones are actually great because they can draw cards in exchange for a little bit of life. And there is a lightning bolt on the Giver of Runes in the upkeep, maybe, probably, I do not know. But the Giver of Runes is
dead. It dies. It dies.
No surprise against something as chock full of removal as Ponza. Not only against lands, but more against creatures, artifacts, and other things. Red and green are definitely colors that can provide a lot of utility cards. And this is one of them, a Bloodbraid Elf, cascading into
another one, I think.
Yeah, it cannot. A Fury, as we said, very potent, but continuing on cascading into a Bonecrusher Giant. So all of a sudden, there is 7 power on the board. Some of them hasty, and another Bonecrusher Giant on the adventure just being a little bit pushed further, so it does not feel as being on the battlefield. And the Death and Taxes player sacrificing their land. This can be either determination or despair. We do not know, but they have a grip full of cards. This is in response to the Ether Vial ticking up to 2. They vial in the Esper Sentinel and then draw a card. Now, interesting, another Pain land and another Esper Sentinel. Now, the Giver of Runes actually is active, and the protection from a color or colorless can just be a roadblock against anything that does not have trample. Now, expending such a useful tool can also be devastating because in response or otherwise, the Ponza player can just point a lightning bolt or any other removal towards any of those creatures, which are 1/2s and 1/1s.
Exactly. Also, it's worth noting that this Ponza player is playing like Gruul aggro right now.
Yeah.
But there we have pitched Fury.
Fury 2/1/1 3 for basically 2 to devastate the whole board, exiling land destruction spell. Maybe they boarded out several of them, and
the Giver will protect one of the Esper Sentinels.
Yeah.
So this Esper Sentinel can block the attack
without issues.
without issues, exactly.
But definitely not a good place for the Death and Taxes the player to be.
With mana base that hurts, with facing a lot of power on the board.
Yeah. And another Bonecrusher Giant, and another land being sacrificed. This probably is desperation mode for them.
Yeah. So what is that the Texas player searching for?
Well, at this point, probably nothing more. Maybe some solitudes to get the board done, but this is another Ether Vial, not something they wanted, with a meager Esper Sentinel, which can be just crushed under bones of the Bonecrusher Giants. This is especially if the Ponza player has a removal spell. This is 4, 8, 9, 10, 11. This should be lethal or close as lethal as it should if they do not have anything to vial in.
Exactly. They have the Ether Vial option, but also I want to know something funny. I think that Death and Taxes actually did the Ponza's job instead of Ponza this game.
Yeah.
They destroyed 3 of their lands.
Well, worth noting is that the Death and Taxes player could vial in now something like the Stoneforge Mystic getting Caldra or even Better Skull, and having it as a blocker is extremely important, and this would probably stabilize them, but to no avail. Now they are at 3 and scooping it up. Game 2 goes to Ponza, which, as you said, is playing more like a Gruul aggro, as they should, pressuring Death and Taxes with creatures and without land destruction is, I think, the plan to go, because, as we saw, Ether Vial is a potent threat in those kinds of matchup. Now, play versus draw is probably a lot dependent on if you want your Blood Moons, your land destructions in or not, because getting it on turn 2 instead of turn 3, or when the Death and Taxes player had their turn to develop, maybe for a Talia or something else, Esper Sentinel or anything else, or Ether Vial is much more potent than being when they have had their second line drop.
Exactly. I understand what you are saying, but definitely, I would call this particular round a very unorthodox. Weird stuff happened. I had fun actually watching. Although I think this Death and Taxes player didn't have fun.
I mean, Fury is always devastating for this kind of game, especially combined with giant beaters. And when I say giant, I do not mean 10/10s. 4/4 is a giant for Death and Taxes. They want to value out small card advantages, small percentages here and there, and if they do not have the ability to do so, the game does not favor them.
Let me digress a bit, because you are such an
avid
experienced. I wanted to say avid, but you are also a very experienced Death and Taxes player. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about a card like Grand Arbiter?
Leonin Arbiter.
What is the name of the card? I think it's a Grand Arbiter. I think it's not modern legal card. And it has a taxing effect.
Grand Arbiter Augustin the Fourth.
Perhaps.
It's Azorius 4 mana 2/4. That taxes all the cards for 1 and your gets cheaper.
Yeah.
This would be great if it was mono white and it cost like 2 or 3 mana. But in blue, if you branch out into blue, then you have a lot more diversity in Meddling Mage, in something like Unsettled Mariner, And also you can go either the human route or the merfolk route if you want to mess with their lands or with
Mm-hmm.
their spells. If you want to go to the human route, then with Talia, then you have powerful one drops and powerful three drops in the human slots. Whether you want to go only blue white or just sky or even more colors, and if you want to go the merfolk route, there is always the merfolk, the one drop merfolk that can turn your lands into islands.
Wow, those are a lot of different variations
I
of
mean,
that in Texas.
yes. Those do not usually go under death and taxes, but this is a topic for a whole video about death and taxes and why it is not good at the moment.
Okay, coming back to the game, we have turn one Giver of Runes on the tax side, and turn one Utopia Sprawl on the Ponza side, and turn two Talia. A great start from the Death and Taxes player. We'll see if there is a great start from the Ponza player, because there will be 3 mana on turn two and possible Blood Moon, Stone Rain, or something similar.
Well, it cannot be because of Talia. But this is the exact thing that Death and Taxes want to be doing. So one drop into powerful two drop into excuse me, taxing two drop into a potential three drop, or actually making a construct token with Urza Saga. And applying small amounts of pressure together with small amounts of disruption. This is something that Death and Taxes player usually goes to.
Though, if perhaps Ponza player sided in not Blood Moon, but Magus of the Moon, this would be a great play.
This would be a great
case.
play turn two, because they have a Flagstones of Trocare, which would become a mountain, and also have the Urza Saga, which would just die. But very important thing, no attacks with Giver of Runes. Because I do think that this is the same player that once attacked with Giver of Runes when they could have protected their Talia, and they paid dearly for it. So this is a mistake that you will learn and do only once in your lifetime, and then you remember it for the rest. But I do think that Talia is doing its work, because this is a naked Bonecrusher Giant that came down. It could have actually killed the Giver of Runes with the Stomp, even through Talia attacks, but decided that a 4/3 body, as we said, giant compared to the Death and Taxes creatures, is more valuable than stunting your development for something like Giver of Runes.
Yeah, it's great to have a creature this big on turn two, but when your opponent has Giver of Runes and can efficiently block this creature by giving protection to someone else,
It's harder.
It's a lot harder, definitely.
And we see actually Death and Taxes player foregoing the construct in favor of Stoneforge Mystic. So with 3 mana, they used 2 of it, including the mana from the Urza Saga, to play Stoneforge Mystic and to ring up Caldra Complete. Now with Talia and with Mother of Runes, Giver of Runes, sorry, this is ample protection for it to stay on the battlefield, probably, barring there are some mass removal, like Anger of the Gods from the other side.
Very scary situation for the Ponza player.
Exactly, yeah. And also probably I hope there is actually some removal in form of March of Otherworldly Lights or Solitudes in their hand, because even with only 1 mana in Talia attacks, it can be played. By exiling either a card for Solitude or a card or several for the March of Otherworldly Lights, maybe even stunting their development further by destroying the Utopia Sprawl, leaving the giant Bonecrusher Giant in the play, because Caldra Complete does not care about creatures. It just mows through them. With first strike, super death touch, and trample, it just moves through them.
Very scary, very, very, very scary card, especially because there is very little combat answer to it, since it has first strike, and when it touches another creature, it exiles it, which is very important to note about this card.
Yeah. So first strike, trample, and death touch are usually not keywords found on one creature because they are extremely powerful together. But Caldra Complete, it gives +5/+5 and almost those words to a creature.
Yeah.
And an attack with the Bonecrusher Giant puts down the Death and Taxes player to 16. They wanted to block but decided against. This is Stony Silence from the Ponza player. Good thinking with all of the artifacts, including the
Ether
Ether Vials and the swords and everything else, but I do not think it is warranted for against actually Death and Taxes, because a lot of their artifacts, barring the Ether Vial, once they are on the battlefield, they are doing their job already. So they do not need to be activated or put from one place to the other. Exceptions, of course, are aforementioned Ether Vial and Sword of Fire and Ice. Maybe some more, but usually they are either construct tokens or they are living weapons.
Exactly. So here, Death and Taxes, I guess, found Ether Vial, but
yeah, probably because nothing else is mandatory or nothing else is better. Shadow Spear cannot be activated. They probably just got mana, yes, exactly, from the Urza's saga, activated the Stoneforge Mystic, put up 5/5, indestructible,
Trampler,
everything else on the battlefield, and they will probably attack with most of their creatures. This is also an artifact creature when it is activated, the factory, but now it will probably be. Oh, this is a neat trick. This is 2 mana, 1 for the Talia attacks, 0 in the X cost, but 1 colored mana pip was paid to destroy the Utopia Sprawl, on the other hand, stunting their mana development even further, and with 1 creature on the battlefield, they cannot possibly deal 16, and there is ample protection in both Giver of Runes and the Talia Guardian of Thraben from the Death and Taxes player's side. Now, in those situations, I do see the appeal of Death and Taxes, but this is an extremely good draw from the deck.
Exactly. So, very neat trick with Prismatic Ending, as you mentioned, and this is for a lot of players don't know this, but the X that you pay, or rather the one that you pay for the tax of the Talia goes into the X of the Prismatic Ending. So basically, you would either way pay 2 mana for removing
something like Talia.
That is 2 mana.
Exactly. And we see game and match goes to Death and Taxes 2-1 by the power of early start Talia, and more importantly Caldra Complete coming off from the Stoneforge Mystic. Now, this is all we have for you today. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you soon with a new video.
And of course, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and of course subscribe to the bell notification thingy.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye.